Michael Happell, President of the MCC, thank you for inviting me here today.
Good to see you, Tony.
It's your grand. Tell me about your involvement with the MCC, because you are not a Melburnian by birth, just how you got to be sort of a member of the MCC and sort of like your business life, sporting life, to where you find yourself now.
Well, Tony, my initial involvement goes a long way back, but it's a little bit non-traditional because, as you said, I was brought up outside of Melbourne, in Brisbane, but my mum and dad were both mad keen Melbourne people and mad keen Demon supporters. And they moved to Brisbane in 1955, so they then missed a lot of good times up in Brisbane when the Demons were doing very well. And Dad was determined that I was going to understand the MCG, understand AFL and cricket, because we knew we were going to come back to Melbourne one day. AFL was totally unknown in Brisbane at those days, but when I grew up in Brisbane in the 1960s, Dad found a little AFL club.
What was it?
Interestingly, it was called the Western Bulldogs. Okay. So they were well ahead of their time. And they had the same theme song as Footscray at the time, the Bulldogs. And so I used to play rugby for the school in the morning and then get in the car and run off, put my AFL jumper on and play AFL in the afternoon. And most of the blokes in my rugby team didn't even know what AFL was in those days. Yeah. So when we moved back to Melbourne in 1973, I was 13 years old. It was a much awaited first visit to the MCG because I was just mad keen on cricket and AFL at that stage. And it was Melbourne St Kilda opening round, over 50,000 people at the G, and I came along with some of my new school friends in Melbourne, and I was blown away by what I saw.
To that end, with your Brisbane, what school in Brisbane, and did you almost keep it a secret because the idea of playing AFL in a rugby stronghold, both codes, union and league, but moreover union, was it one of those things that I can't be bothered telling them, or I better not tell them because they just might, a bit of taunting might take place?
Well, yeah, I suppose I was pre-teen, so I wasn't too worried about the taunting. It was just that you had to go into this incredible explanation of the game. It just wasn't known in Brisbane at the time. In fact, the only VFL replay was 11 p.m. Sunday night match of the day. And if the Demons were playing, Dad, even when I was 8, 9 and 10, Dad would keep prodding me to keep me awake and make me watch the game.
Yeah. So it's 73, you get down here, you come into the MCG. Did you have any idea that it would be as vast and Coliseum, even in those sort of early 70s days? Did the expectation meet the reality? And that is, I reckon I'm in for a big day here, but I don't know what it is. And once you come here, you look around and you're blown away by it. Totally
blown away. No matter how much if you haven't been here, no matter how much you think about the capacity of the ground and the enclosure of the stands, when you see it for the first time, especially after the build-up that I had, just blown away. Couldn't be prepared for it. Even though it was only half full on that day, of course, with 50,000 people here. Yeah, so it's Melbourne and St Kilda. And was anything fired there? You think to yourself, I'd like to somehow get involved on that day, or it was one of those things you finish uni life, you start a business life as well, and then through connections, they're coming here. You've got to work out how do I actually get into this place? How do I become a part of it? Well, to be honest, when I first saw the ground, all my dreams about involvement were out on the ground.
Yeah,
not behind the scenes. I was a keen cricketer and loved my footy, and all my dreams as a youngster were about getting on that turf. And it was only when the realisation hit in my early 20s that was never going to happen, that we had to think of some other way of getting involved with the ground.
Nice to know you got into your early 20s. I don't even know that I got into the teens with my sporting ambitions. But then, you've mentioned sport, and I reckon it's great as a youngster you played Aussie rules in Brisbane. Just tell us what sports you actually did gravitate to, because this is a sporting club.
Yeah, well, Tony, I was a very keen footy player and cricketer as a youngster. I gave away football when I finished school because I was a bit of a scrawny runt and just couldn't keep up. Cricket I kept playing through my university days, and I played district cricket for Melbourne University very proudly for a few years, and I even played a season's cricket in London many years ago when I finished university for the Cricketers Club of London, which is a group of ex-Middlesex players that play out of London. Yeah.
Which it's just something like that. And I don't know whether it's a 50-50 thing here, but if I had to have my last shekel, I still think that the spirit of cricket courses through the veins of the Melbourne Cricket Ground, just even by very name, than perhaps the Aussie rules does. But conversely, there's more Aussie rules played here, obviously, than cricket.
That's right. If you think about the global reputation of the ground, it's very much, and the club, it's very much more about the cricket. But obviously the numbers speak for themselves, with around 3 million people a year coming to watch events, and nearly 2.5 million of those to watch AFL.
With obviously football and cricket, they even in the 70s become more time consuming. Your business interests obviously start to kick in as well. Did you find that sooner or later, I want to keep up a sport, but the demands of being a district cricket, or whether it be football, was just too great, you had to find something else?
I did. When I finished university and started work, I found district cricket a bit of a battle, because it was Saturday and Sunday, and I was a marginal player at first 11 level. Probably had a lot more fun in the seconds, where I batted number 3 and bowled my 20 overs.
Yeah, lovely.
Didn't do that in the first.
Did you skip it to the side?
No, I didn't skip it to the side. No. And then I discovered the lovely old sport of real tennis.
Which is a section here. Now,
correct.
I reckon a stack of our members, which I know number into the other hundreds of thousands, wouldn't realise that real tennis is a section within the MCC.
It is. We've got 130 members, and a lot of them have come from squash and tennis, and are very keen to play the game. At the moment we have access to the courts at the Royal Melbourne Tennis Club, but in due course we'd love to get a home for that game. If
we take a line through Nick Kyrgios and John McEnroe, fiery tempers, do you encounter any firebrands in the rather ancient art of real tennis?
A lot more focus on good behaviour on court in real tennis, Tony.
And again, I know that the section's here. If I was to ask you to summarise the rules and the mores and the protocols of real tennis in 30 seconds, how do we play it?
I would say that it's a mixture of chess and tennis, as you know it. It is the original game of tennis, but in the 1870s, the courts were very, very expensive to build, and the game's very hard to play because it's a rock-hard ball. So a couple of chaps went outside and simplified the rules, got a nice soft ball and set it up on the grass, and that's how normal tennis started. So everything you know about normal tennis, from all the expressions, serving, forehand, backhand, all the scoring system, all comes from real tennis.
We love the sporting aspect, and this is what really drives the MCC, but there has to be a business acumen that great administrators, architects, financiers, everything like that, have to be involved in the proper, diligent running of this club. What's your background in business?
My background is a career with PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Yep.
I was a partner there for 24 years, and finished my last 4 years. I was chairman of the firm in Australia and a member of the firm's global board. I've also got good governance experience from being on a couple of school boards, and I've also been Scotch College in Lauriston.
Yeah.
And I've also been a director of Breast Cancer Network Australia for 10 years, a charity that I'm passionately involved in.
Absolutely. And just on the BCNA, we see the Women in Pink Day at the MCG, and it is something that is as moving as any of the other great events that are held here to really focus in on something in life. But the BCNA, very much like Men's Health as far as Beyond Blue, very much like, let's call it the E.J. Whitten Foundation on prostate issues, have really come into focus over the last 10 to 15 years, other than the fact is, oh, well, it happens, bad luck.
Absolutely. I think there's always been good money going into research for cures, but more recently people realised that care and support for the people with those diseases is just as important. And that's the role of BCNA, is to care and support those that get breast cancer, and to lobby government about getting new drugs on the PBS and that sort of thing, so that the journey that men and women have when they get breast cancer is as good as it can be. Which
takes us to a sort of a maturing Michael Happell, and who nominated you? I'm always fascinated to know who seconded your nomination to become part of the club.
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't know who nominated. I was put down at birth, and I presume it's one of my dad's friends, but I don't know the answer to that.
No, that's very good, because you're always indebted to that person.
Absolutely.
That nominated. All of us are that have been nominated here.
And the foresight of my dad to put me down at birth, even though I was born in Brisbane.
Yes.
So we have a lot of that.
So for all of us that have been sort of grateful for the being nominated when we're born or at a young age, we get to 2019. How many members across all categories do we have here?
132,000 at the moment, Tony.
Right. So what gives us a waiting list of?
About 18 years.
Yeah. Well, that's not too bad, especially if you're a young person. That the 18 years, you're not going to use that much of it prior to that. There's always going to be, and let's talk in the present now, but there's always going to be this ground and the management of this ground itself. Just as far as the infrastructure away from the Oval goes, how do we satisfy the current membership while making sure that those who are waiting to come onto know that, yes, I've got to hold firm, I've still got to not drift away from this, because as we know, as a 2019, people do want the instantaneous rather than the long term.
Well, bringing in the provisional membership category was really important from that point of view, Tony. 30,000 of our members are provisional members, and if we hadn't introduced that category, then the wait for membership was going to start blowing out far too long for it to be healthy for the club. Mm-hmm. So we put a lot of work into extra member facilities and things to make sure that the introduction of the provisional members didn't negatively impact the member experience for our current members. But we think that's gone pretty well.
With your business life getting to a stage where you've got time to spend on other boards, but this is something that I'd imagine that people would like to be involved in, that have got a real passion for the MCC as a whole. Who invited you to sort of consider at least giving up some of your time and becoming part of the board here?
It was the president, Paul Sheehan, who gave me a call just when he was becoming president, taking over from David Micklejohn. And he explained to me that they needed to make sure they had good succession planning around the treasurer role, and needed someone with the right finance skills and who had a love of the club and the right sporting background, and asked me if I was interested. And I didn't have to be asked twice.
No, and then 9 years later, you're president. We find in the commercial world that the naming of stadia around the world, there are some very interestingly named stadia, and there are some obviously ones of great importance and magnitude. Is it a bit like King Canute holding back the tide, saying we will never allow the MCC to have a name attached to it, so it is named as the blank MCG or MCC?
I think I can confidently say that in my time, there's no way that this is going to be called anything other than the Melbourne Cricket Ground.
No, fair enough. The ground itself, you've got a balance between cricket and football. We're all seeing, at the moment, an interesting battle taking place between the SCG and the use of their pitches, what we have here, balancing the football and cricket thing. How does the MCC go about making sure that all interests are as met to the best extent as they can?
Well, there's a clear definition between the football season and the cricket season, which helps us break those two up. The challenge is around the special events that we try and have during the year and fitting those in. Yeah. There's usually a window of opportunity around February, March, and another window of opportunity October to have some special event to provide more interesting content at this great venue. But we need to keep those to a limited number so that we don't impact the playing surface and really get in the way of the key content, which is obviously the cricket and the football.
Did you ever think, indeed, did your friends and friends of your parents, whomever it might be, ever envisage that The Undertaker last October would come down in front of 75,000 people to take on Triple H in a tag team wrestling match and create such a global buzz that, we've had a lot of things here. Billy Graham was here, the great evangelist, 130,000. And it is fair to say that World Championship Wrestling and Billy Graham are some poles apart.
Absolutely. Not only do we have the wrestling, but we had Bon Jovi and Eminem as well over the last 12 months. So,
do you have a favourite Eminem song?
Not my cup of tea, but there were certainly 80,000 people here that night that were enjoying themselves thoroughly.
My word, and this is what the great, the asset that is here, and it's so beautifully located. With the sporting and obviously other cultural iconic events, people can argue whether the wrestling is an iconic event. I believe it is. But does the group really pursue it vigorously year on year to say, we can have an opportunity to partner with these other great promoters to bring big things to the MCC away from its traditional, let's call it just the footy and the cricket. And obviously there's a bit of state of origin rugby league as well. Is that an ongoing discussion that you have?
It is. We feel it's our responsibility. This is the people's ground, and we want to bring a variety of content. But it's always going to, because of those limited windows of opportunity, it's always going to be limited to 3 or 4 things a year maximum. In fact, over the next 12 months, it'll be less because we've got the Women's T20 World Cup cricket in February, March, and then we've got the Men's T20 World Cup later in the year, so that'll limit the opportunities for other events even more over the next 12 months.
Yeah, it was such an exciting thing to actually have here, and we saw the Men's World Cup, it was about 4 or 5 years ago, that Australia won so handsomely, that you just are probably arriving at a right time. Do you give yourself a little pinch and say, I'm actually going to be presiding over a World Cup, or even better still perhaps, I'm actually going to be the president when Melbourne wins a flag in however long your tenure as president is?
Well, in my moments away from the ground, you might have flitting moments where you think about that. But when you're here on the day for big occasions, you're so focused on what's going on in the day that it's really down to business. But I was here for Anzac Day last week, and I did have to pinch myself when the ceremony was on to think that I'm a part now of running this fantastic club and this fantastic stadium, and at events like that, it does bring goosebumps.
We see the ground and the redevelopment that took place here, I think under David Jones's direction. Correct. And the wailing and gnashing of teeth that took place. They're getting rid of the old bar down there, and the members are not going to seem the same. But it stops for no one, development. And do you sense a necessity, because of other great stadia, we need to keep modernising every couple of years and then have a sort of what we can do with the finance that we've got, and then what we would like to do so everyone could be as happy as possible, as could be allowable?
There's constant planning around getting that balance between what's affordable but keeping this as one of the top stadiums in the world. In the year coming up, we've got 3 major projects in that regard. We're replacing the audio system around the ground, which we will have done by the Boxing Day test. That's a huge undertaking and will cost around $26 million to get done. We're planning replacement of the lights in the light towers with LED lighting. That's clearly emerged as the best practice in lighting, and to keep the ground at world best, we have to make that change. So we're hoping to have that done by the T20 Women's World Cup next year. Mm-hmm. And the National Sports Museum, which is also housed at the MCG and under our responsibility, is about 10 years old now, and it is in need of a refresh. So that will be happening the last half of this year and early next year, and we're spending about $17 million to refresh that great sports museum.
All businesses have some form of forward planning, and towards 2030, towards 2040. Does the MCC have such a thing that this is where we're going to aim to be in 10-year or 20-year cycles?
We have a formal 5-year planning process, but we do have planning that looks out further to that. And the big thing that's on our long-term plans at the moment is what will happen to the whole precinct at the time that we look at either rebuilding or refurbishing the southern stand, which is probably 10 to 12 years out from now.
It's only 25 years old, because that's the thing that, 1992, it's the World Cup, and look, the best thing of all time, and barely a quarter of a century's passed, and you've got your intel says we've got to refresh, we've got to do something significant to it. Yeah,
well, it'll be 40-something years old by early 2030. Yeah. And at that stage, it'll either need a very major refurb or a rebuild. And it's got some constraints with how it is at the moment. That stand was built before the latest best practice in all the back office areas of the stand. So I'm talking about the corporate function rooms, the quality of the exit and entrance process into the ground, that sort of thing. So there will be a big decision that has to be made in another 10 years' time, whether we refurb or rebuild. But we're leaning more towards a rebuild, particularly given it's likely that we'll integrate that stand much more with the precinct. If Richmond Station is rebuilt, we want to have better movement of people from Richmond to the ground. It's likely that the railway yards may be covered in that time period. We're very keen to make sure that that stays as a sporting precinct and has the right connectivity to the MCG. So a refurb and a retrofit of those areas to the G is unlikely to be the best solution.
I'm not looking to put you in direct conflict with the beautiful Yarra Park behind us and those who would steadfastly maintain no more encroachment on the green space that is there. Is that pretty much that you're going to have to work within, that the MCC is going to have to work within, and that is whatever we're going to do, it's actually going to have to be on the southern side? We can't take any more ground, or is that just an agreement in principle that you have with Vic Parks and obviously the state government that what's there now won't be in any way affected?
Our thinking is that the park will pretty much stay as it is, that when we redevelop the southern stand there may be a little bit more movement out to a very small degree, but obviously over Brunton Avenue and over the railway yards are the areas that we're looking to potentially create extra facilities and make sure that we keep this as a sporting precinct, because it is one of the great sporting precincts as well.
It is extraordinary, especially so much, so close. In your short time that you've been president, is there something that surprised you about this, or you've actually learned something about being in the role just by having a chat to members and speaking to the people involved, maybe even at board level, that you may not have been aware that came with the job when you decided to take it on?
I think the thing that I've learned is just the level of interest in the club and the passion for the club that the members have has really come to the fore. I've spoken to a lot more members, and whether it be walking through the long room on game day and just chatting to a few members about how they're finding things, their passion for the facilities, for the ambience of the club, coming here with their friends and their own rituals around match day, right through to going out and visiting our sporting sections and their passion for what they do and their involvement with the club. And also on non-event days, of course, we have a whole lot of stuff happening here in the club.
Well, I just saw another school group going through of little kids who, no doubt, when you're a young fella up there in Brisbane, the passion may well have been inspired. The tour guides here, I just think that's just a little thing about and we sort of might take it for granted as members, but on a daily basis, it's just people who are still fascinated about what this place can bring. Almost it's a bit of an air of mythology about it.
Yeah, the tours are very, very popular. We also have a lot of members who come and use the facilities on non-game days. Something that not all members know is that the committee room is open for lunch Monday to Friday to all members. And it's actually used as a members' dining room for approximately half the matches of the year as well. So it's a very accessible facility, and there's just so much variety of facilities here on game days and non-game days for members.
Have you noticed an age discrepancy? Because my son's now, he's a provisional member, but is it a younger group that like to have a beer up on the fourth floor, and is there an older one who just still like to go downstairs and get amongst the cut and thrust down there?
The youngsters certainly seem to gravitate upstairs, and after the game they love the Percy Beams bar as well. But there's a whole range of facilities for everyone. So,
but my final, two final things. Instead of everyone, there's a doppelganger. You've got a look-alike. You could pass for Damien Fleming's older brother. Has anyone ever run that one by you?
I get a few.
Yeah.
I get Bernhard Langer. I get Barry Manilow, but I do explain to people that unfortunately I probably sing like Bernhard Langer and play golf like Barry Manilow. But
yes.
No, I'd have to say Damien Fleming's a new one.
No, I just was having a chat with you today. And the final one's just a general thing for members, especially those who are looking at this, who are still waiting on. In the next 5 to 10 years, is there a plan, as there was a few years ago, let's just create the category, get a few more members in, we can accommodate it. Is that basically it for now? Or you think, no, I reckon we still need to keep trying to get more members, as is practical, to into the ground?
We agreed with the membership that we'd halt the provisional members at 30,000 for a period and just reassess how things were going.
Okay.
So we're in that we're in the middle of that reassessment period at the moment, and the jury's still out as to whether we're going to extend the provisional membership further.
Been a blast. Thank you very much, Michael. Look forward to having a chat with you at a later date, and we'll just see how this wonderful ground is kicking on under your leadership. Thank you today.
Thanks very much, Tony.